Welcome to the Easy and Simple Sourdough Starter Guide. You are probably wondering, how did I get here? Where did the desire to raise sourdough babies even come from? How did this Walmart moo-moo get on me? Don't worry, we will start at the beginning. Sourdough Parenting Guide, how it begins. It usually starts with boy meets girl, and what would you know? Sparks simply fly. Love grows and life goes on from season to season. From building a home together to a family of their own, and a few animals to add a little joy along the way. They march towards the ripe age of 30. There she finds grandma hobbies and simplicity, inviting her in with the idea of healthy home-baked goods for her family. So now that you're caught up, let's explore the possible benefits of sourdough. As always, do your own research so that you can make the informed decision for your family. Some of the possible benefits of sourdough are that it could aid in digestion, introduce good bacteria to your gut, giving your body a boost of vitamins, minerals and antioxidants, and even aiding in blood sugar regulation. So if you are ready to have a kitchen full of gut-healthy, nutrient-rich sourdough goodies for your family like this mum, here is what you will need: a mason jar. But as any sourdough mama will tell you, it's really jars with an S, as you will likely end up with many. Flour is one of the main ingredients to bring your sourdough baby to life. While you can use almost any grain flour, I suggest using whole wheat or rye in order to help your sourdough baby set up the healthiest gluten networks. Filtered water is the other main ingredient it takes to start a healthy sourdough baby. The chlorine in unfiltered water could very well destroy your sourdough baby's newly forming yeasts, resulting in weaker gluten networks or even fatality for your poor sourdough baby. A wooden spoon is an extremely important part of your sourdough starter, so that when you feed your sourdough baby, you can mix your water and flour into your hungry sourdough baby and feed its gluten networks. Now, there are a few things you will want to avoid for the sake and health of your sourdough baby, and maybe even your family. One of those things are metal utensils. This includes not leaving your starter in metal bowls. The toxins in metal can be broken down due to the acids produced in your starter and can leach into your starter and in turn be in your family's foods. Cold temps is another highly important thing to make sure your sourdough baby avoids at all costs. Cooler temps can affect the fermentation process of your starter and prevent it from progressing at all. You'll definitely want to keep your sourdough baby in a warm place of storage around 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit or approximately 23 to 29 degrees Celsius according to some dough parents. And another thing that I highly suggest avoiding is burning your little sourdough baby up in the oven. You may wonder how this could even happen. I know I sure did when I first started researching starters. Many sourdough mamas suggest keeping your dough baby in a jar in your oven for warmth when using or starting it. However, the fatality rate of sourdough babies kept in ovens can be unfortunately high, so make sure you remember your little sour baby in the oven. Now, here are a few things that you should know when starting your journey into sourdough parenthood. You can cover your sourdough baby in almost whatever cloth you fancy. However, some of the most suggested coverings are cheesecloth, a great option for covering your jar to give your sourdough baby airflow, but also keep out unwanted taste testers and inhibitors that could potentially harm the health of our starter baby. Tea towels come highly suggested by many as a covering for your jar or your loaves, as they proof much later in the process of sourdough making. You can cut these into squares and place them over your jar and under the rim. However, if you are not sold on tea towels and cheesecloth, you can also simply use your jar's lid. While making your starter baby, you will want to leave the lid on loosely so that air can flow and gases can release. Now that we have covered the basics, let's get to making our dough baby. It is important to note that starters, just like real babies, have different needs. Some dough babies need more water, some need more flour. Your demographic and the humidity inside your house and the area you live can make it wetter or drier and affect the specific needs of your sourdough baby. Many people overthink the process and overcomplicate it when it's actually very simple. For day one, you will need to take your mason jar and the covering of your choice and lay them on the counter. Then place equal parts of the flour of your choice and water into the jar and mix with your wooden spoon. So, for example, you can place a half cup of water and a half cup of flour in a jar and mix thoroughly. Cover lightly and day 1 is done. Are there other ways to do this? Yes, and many ways that are successful, but to simplify the process until we are more comfortable experimenting with different combinations of flours and different water ratios. This is a good place to start. For day 2, you will check for bubbles. Check to see if any bubbles have started to form. Give it a stir and then place in a warm spot again for 24 more hours. Easy peasy. On days 3, you should see plenty of activity. If not, it is perfectly okay to continue to try to grow your sourdough baby or scrap and start the process again. Days 3 through 7, every 24 hours you can discard half and feed. Feedings are really simple. You simply add flour and water to the already hungry starter. For regular maintenance and growth, it is perfectly reasonable to keep the ratio at 1 to 1 to 1. So, pour half of your starter into a measuring cup. Take note of the size of the cup and pour into a clean jar. Discard the rest of the previous starter. Then use the same measurement of the cup that you separated the starter with and add that exact amount of flour and water. So, if you ended up with half a cup of starter, you would add half a cup of flour and half a cup of water and mix thoroughly each day, then place in its cosy warm home. On day 7, your sourdough baby should be ready for use. Your sourdough baby should be bubbly and double in size. It should have a pleasant and maybe even tangy smell. There are cases where it could take longer than 7 days. When noticing delays in growth, look over the environment of your sourdough baby and make sure that you are feeding it flour and water that is good for its growth. One thing that many new mamas worry about when it comes to their sourdough baby is sicknesses. So let's talk about times when you should worry and when you are in the clear. Sometimes when we go to feed our sourdough baby, we notice growth, but not only in its beautiful networks, but sometimes on the sides and surface of your baby. Oftentimes sourdough mamas will see something white, grey or pink growing on the surface of their sourdough baby. There are generally 3 possible causes for this. 1 is mould. Mould can come in a variety of colours and shades, grey and green being commonly easy to spot. If you spot mould in your sourdough baby, it is perfectly fine to discard and start fresh. Matter of fact, there is no better option when it comes to mould. Make sure you disinfect your jars and utensils regularly and keep your sourdough baby lightly covered to help try to prevent mould spores from settling down. If you spot something off about your sourdough baby and are concerned at the thought of mould, remember that one of the biggest identifying factors is if it is fuzzy. Mould is generally fuzzy or has a hairy texture to it that helps us identify it as mould. Another concerning issue is the presence of Sourdough marcescens, a bacteria that can develop in improperly maintained starters. You'll recognise it by its bright red, orange or pink tint, which may appear on the surface of your starter. It can appear as streaks across your starter or down the sides of the jar. This bacteria can pose a health risk as it's not safe for consumption and can lead to foodborne illness. If you spot any reddish hues in your sourdough, it's best to discard the starter immediately and start fresh to avoid contamination. Chyme yeast is another thing sourdough mamas have to worry about. While it is generally not harmful, it can be a sign that your sourdough baby is not in the right environment for its success. Chyme yeast generally lets you know that there is not enough acid in your sourdough starter baby, or that the starter is too wet. You can make adjustments to your feeding schedule and measurements to restore balance. Unlike with mould and Sourdough marcescens, Chyme yeast, while you do want to look out for it, it can easily be removed and you can continue with your sourdough baby, as is with adjustments to your feeding and environment. Few characteristics about Chyme yeast is that it is pretty translucent. It usually is white or light grey and has a powdery, chalky texture, unlike mould, which is fuzzy. It creates a flat, patchy film over the sourdough starter, and while it won't have a bad or rotten smell, it can give your sourdough baby a bit of a different scent until resolved. One more thing to mention is the production of hooch. Hooch is a natural byproduct of fermentation and occurs when your starter is hungry and needs feeding. Simply stir it back in or pour it off, then give your starter a fresh feeding to bring it back to life. Stirring it in can give your starter a more tangy sour taste. So if you prefer a less tangy sourdough, then pour it out and continue as you were. That's it. Now you're ready to nurture your own sourdough baby. Remember, this process doesn't have to be complicated. Sourdough's all about letting nature do the work, so don't overthink it. Feed it, keep it cozy, and watch it grow. Thanks for joining me on this simple, fun journey to homemade sourdough. Don't forget, the best sourdough comes with a little patience and a lot of love. Happy baking, and see you next time.